Hello, folks. Today, we're going to do something that's never been done in the history of show business, which is that we're going to read a random United States law so that we get a feeling for what is like an average law. What does a random law look like in a country? You may not live in the U.S. Hopefully, you live in a democracy where people publish their laws, they debate about their laws, and then they come up with a list of laws, and those are the only things that can really be enforced against you. There's a little bit of a that's not the full story. There are things like regulations and so on and so forth. But the idea that we have published laws that we can look at and understand, I think, is pretty important. We didn't have that for a lot of human history. It's an important innovation. However, we have so many laws that I suspect nobody really knows what all of them are. In fact, what I read recently was that we don't even know how many federal crimes there are. We know that it's probably somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 maybe, but we don't know the exact number, which suggests that there's sort of an arbitrariness potentially in how they're enforced, how they're interpreted, and that sort of thing. So we've been looking at code, source code for software. The source code in software defines how what actions a computer executes, but there's also code in a sense for humans that kind of define what a society or government looks like. So I thought it would be fun to look at some of those, to randomly sample it and take a look at what a random law looks like. And if we do this a few times, we might get a sense of what the laws are like that we wouldn't get if we were, if we just did the normal path of specializing in law school or whatever and studying basically summaries of the laws from people who have seen a chunk of it and condensed it down. So let's try it. Hopefully this script will work. All right, here we are. Capital losses. This is, I guess, US Code Volume 26. I don't know what we're talking about. Something about capital losses. So we have A, B, C. We have capital losses, net capital gains, capital loss carryovers, and special rules for mere holding or investment companies. Something about investments, except as provided. Okay, so A is in general, B is recapture of previous deductions for capital gains, C is non-recaptured capital gains, and so on, except as provided in paragraph B. There shall be allowed as a deduction an amount equal to the net capital loss for the taxable year. The aggregate amount allowable as a deduction under subparagraph A for any taxable year shall be reduced by the lesser of the non-recaptured capital gains deductions, or the amount of the accumulated earnings and profits of the corporation as of the close of the preceding year. Okay. And non-recaptured capital gains deductions. For the purposes of subparagraph B, the term non-recaptured capital gains deduction means the excess of the aggregate amount allowable as a deduction under paragraph 6 for preceding taxable year, beginning after July 1984, over the aggregate of the reductions under subparagraph B for the preceding taxable year. So these are all defining variables. This is defining some sort of formula, in particular like a ratio, but it's not in symbols. They're trying to do it in words. It's, of course, really confusing, just like reading the tax, when you're doing your taxes. I think if I can find the preferences in events, that there's some sort of thing called like continuous mode. Full screen continuous, maybe? There we go. So we can scroll up and see what are we even talking about. Statutory notes and related subsidiaries. Effective date of 1976 amendment. There's some stuff. And effective date of 1958 amendment. Accumulated taxable income. So it seemed like we were talking about corporations. I'm wondering if this applies both to corporations and to individuals. For the purposes of this subtitle, the term accumulated capital income means the taxable income adjusted in the manner provided in subsection B, minus the sum of dividends paid, deduction as defined in section 561, and the accumulated earnings credit. Okay, so you have some taxable income adjusted in the manner, so it's adjusted in some manner, and we're going to subtract off the dividends paid The dividends paid deduction. I feel like the only things that pay dividends are corporations, right? And subsection B, I was thinking is something that was above this, but this is defined. This is below. So this is saying we're going to tell you below how these are adjusted, and then in B it says these are the adjustments that you're going to use in subsection A. This is already really confusing. This is essentially a pointer. It's a pointer to this thing, and this is a pointer to the thing above it. But it doesn't say like 535 subsection B. It just says subsection B. And I guess you're, so there's like local scope going on. So this is something about federal income taxes. And excess profits, taxes, and income. War profits, what's a war profit? And excess profits, taxes of foreign countries. And possessions of the United States to the extent not allowable as a deduction under some other thing, section 275A4, accrued during the taxable year. And then there's some stuff about charitable contributions and special deductions, and they're provided in some other part. So we have some other reference here. And you have the net operating loss, and so on. And then we have things like capital loss carryovers. The net capital loss for any taxable year shall be treated as a short-term capital loss in the next taxable year. Why? The net capital, so in this year, if I have a net capital loss, is it also treated as a short-term capital loss in the next taxable year? And so on. And then there's the accumulated earning credit. So there are two things I kind of want to figure out. One is, what is war profits? And of course, since I had to reboot, I lost my things, my tabs. War profits. War profits are the unreasonable profits made by individuals or organizations from warfare or by selling weapons and other goods to parties at war. Are these so common that the tax code has to mention it in the first few paragraphs? Companies can profit from war in a number of ways, including selling weapons and military equipment, providing training and other services to the military, exploiting resources made accessible through war and conflict, and logistics and reconstruction. Wartime conditions can allow companies to overcharge the government or engage in fraud because of the need for speed of delivery and less rigorous oversight. Okay, so this is like, you need some number of jackets, and you need them right away. So like the jacket making company can overcharge and things like that. So what if we add here, what is this, 26,535? Let's ask Gemini, tell me about US Code 26,535. Part of the Internal Revenue Code deals with the concept of accumulated taxable income for corporations. This essentially refers to the corporation's retained, I almost read it as retrained, the retained earnings that exceed what the IRS considers a reasonable business need. Okay. So you've earned more money than the IRS thinks that you need for your business. The IRS imposes a penalty tax on corporations that accumulate earnings beyond their reasonable business needs. I was unaware of this. This is to prevent corporations from avoiding income tax by retaining earnings instead of distributing them as dividends. So this is essentially an incentive to pay investors through dividends. So you get it by taking the corporation's taxable income, making certain adjustments, and subtracting the dividends paid deduction and the accumulated earnings credit. So that's the formula essentially that we saw in the text, but it was all confusingly worded, as is the case with any law is a technical field. They have some a jargon, a way of saying things, etc. Just like I'm sure that there are in any technical field, there are concepts that are not so hard but are expressed in kind of a difficult jargon. The lawyer jargon kind of tends to be like overly verbose and flowery, I think, to a lot of people. But other than that, there's seems like there's really only a handful of like really technical terms, and they're all usually in Latin. All right, reasonable business need. So the IRS considers various factors to determine if a corporation's earning accumulation is reasonable, including future needs for expansion. That seems like, I don't know how they would know that. That seems something that a corporation might play close to their chest if they don't want competitors to know they're expanding, but perhaps they disclose it to the IRS. Perhaps the IRS has some rubric for knowing if a corporation needs to expand. Product development, debt retirement, working capital requirements. And there are penalties if a corporation is found to have accumulated earnings beyond this, etc. So I'll ask I want to know more about war profits. There shall be allowed as a deduction federal income and excess profits, taxes and income, war profits and excess profits, taxes of foreign countries, and possessions of the United States, etc. I'm not sure I know what this means. So I'll say in this part, what are war profits? So these are profits earned by businesses during a wartime that exceed their normal peacetime earnings. The excess profits were often subject to higher tax rates known as excess profits taxes. The purpose of these taxes was to generate revenue, curb inflation, and prevent unfair enrichment. So how much does Microsoft? So suppose Microsoft sells AI services to the military during war. Does that fall under the war profits heading, I guess? Concept? So it depends on several factors. Specific definition. The precise definition of war profits can vary depending on the context of the applicable laws. In the past, it often referred to excessive profits earned from manufacturing or selling goods directly used in war efforts. It depends, I guess, on the nature of AI services. The type of AI services provided would be a key factor. If these services directly contribute to military operations or the development of weapons, they could be more closely associated with war profits and profit margins. So it depends. So it's linking me to war profiteering. Okay. I think just for fun, let's try another random law. Okay, so now we are in US Code 21. This is some statutory notes and related subsidiaries. Oopsie. Where did it go? Here. The amendments made by subsections A and B. Blah, 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 blah. I don't know what this is. Let's try one more. Well, no. Let's at least try to figure out a little bit about what this is. So this is some stuff about savings. This might be more IRS stuff, although we see the public health and welfare. We see crimes and criminal procedures and prosecution for any violation of law. These are all amendments. Maybe we can scroll up to see the floor, the previous subheading that has more content. So subchapter 2, definitions. Definitions generally. For the purpose of this chapter, the term state, except as used in the last sentence, blah, blah, blah of this title means the state or territory of the United States, the District of Columbia, and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. The term territory means any territory or possession of the United States, including the District of Columbia, and excluding the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico and the Canal Zone. The Canal Zone, I assume, is the zone around the Panama Canal. The term interstate commerce means the commerce between any state or territory and any place outside thereof, and commerce within the District of Columbia or within any other territory. So they keep having to shout out the District of Columbia. I don't know if they ever make this simpler. I wonder if there's any. I guess this definition is what makes it simpler. Is that like there's this by using this definition, you incorporate the District of Columbia into what you're talking about already. So perhaps if you like forget to use the correct term, then you might accidentally exclude the District of Columbia. I'm curious if there are any laws that accidentally exclude DC. The term drug means articles recognized in the official United States pharmacopoeia, official homeopathic pharmacopoeia of the United States, or official national formulary, or any supplement to any of them. And B, articles intended for use in the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease in man or other animal. And C, articles other than food intended to affect the structure or any function of the body of man or other animals. Anything other than food. So that would include vitamins and also water. Unless water counts as a food, I guess water is probably a food. Intended to affect the structure. So does it not count if it's not intended to affect the structure? But it does. And D, articles intended for use as a component of any article specified in clause A, B, or C. A food or dietary supplement for which a claim, subject to sections blah, blah, blah of this title or sections blah of this title, is made in accordance with the requirements of whatever, that this title is not a drug solely because the label or labeling contains such a claim. A food, dietary ingredient, or dietary supplement for which a truthful and not misleading statement is made in accordance with whatever this section is, 343R6 of this title, is not a drug under Clause C solely because the label of the labeling contains such a statement. Okay, so this is saying a food for which a truthful or not misleading statement is made. If that is not a drug. So I don't know what this. I don't know how to interpret not a drug. So I think this is saying that if you're a food and you make a claim under Clause C, and the claim is truthful and not misleading, then your thing is not a drug. Well, that's how do I interpret this sentence? So the sentence is part of the U.S. Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, specifically under Section 201G1C. It essentially states that a food, dietary ingredient, or dietary supplement that is truthfully and accurately labeled according to specific regulations is not considered a drug. Okay, that's what I thought, but I wasn't entirely sure. So this is about things like vitamins and dietary supplements. Let's do one more. So we got the IRS code. We got some stuff about vitamins. Those are both important, I think, laws. What about this one? This is about appointments. This looks constitution-y. Establishment and purposes of the offices of Inspector General. Establishment in general, subject to some paragraph above, in each of the establishments listed in section such and such. It's going to take me a while to figure out like what I need to ignore to get to the meat here. The offices established under Section A are established in order to create independent and objective units. 1. To conduct and supervise audits and investigations relating to the program and operations of the establishments listed above to provide leadership and coordination and recommended policies for activities designated to promote economy, efficiency, and effectiveness in the administration of those programs and operations, and B, to prevent and detect fraud and abuse in those programs, and 3, to provide a means for keeping the head of the establishment and Congress fully and currently informed about problems and deficiencies related to the administration of those programs. And then here are some stuff about appointments. So what does the Inspector General do? Presumably inspect. Inspectors General. Definitions. The term establishment means the Department of Agriculture, Commerce, Defense, Education, Energy, Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, the Interior, Justice, Labor, State, Transportation, Homeland Security, the Treasury or Veterans Affairs, blah, 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 blah. The term federal agency means an agency as defined in section whatever. And the head of the establishment means the Secretary of Agriculture, Education, etc. So these are a bunch of departments. The head means the secretary. And this is just defining some variables. This is kind of like programming in kind of like an early math language, maybe Fortran. Something like this, or maybe even C. There's an old style, which we don't really use anymore, where you say like all of the variables you're going to use ahead of time, and you define them, and then you use them. The current style is you can define variables close to when you need them. I think maybe MATLAB has that style. I kind of associate it with math or like logic programming. And so I think that that's what's going on here. I'll ask ChatGPT, what are some languages that require you to define all variables of a function at the beginning of a function rather than in the especially older or low-level ones, defining all variables at the beginning of a function is a requirement. Here are a few examples. ANSI C, variables must be declared. In C89, variables must be declared at the start of a function before any executable statements. Okay, so later you can mix them with code. In older versions of Fortran, that's right, Pascal, COBOL, although not commonly used for general purpose programming, Agda, and Algol. Okay, I'll say generate a COBOL program that defines a list of departments, including education, homeland security, and agriculture, and defines the head of a department to be the secretary. For example, Secretary of Agriculture would be a head. So I have no idea how COBOL works, but whatever pick is, this is setting some variable names up. I'm guessing move is an assignment, so move education to department names. At 1, I'm guessing 1 is maybe the I'm guessing 3 here is the length of the vector or container. I think this probably means the index of education is 1, the index of homeland security is 2. So we're doing I presume 1-based indexing as opposed to 0-based. And then this is just creating a list of department heads. So this is kind of how I see what's going on with the code. We have the definitions are up front, and we have to slog through some definitions before we get to any meat. And then there's a bunch of amendments. And here we finally get down here, the establishment and purposes of offices of Inspector General. In general, subject to paragraph 2, in each of the establishments listed in section 401 of this title, there is established an office of Inspector General, Department of the Treasury. In the Department of the Treasury, there is established an office of Inspector General of the Department of the Treasury, and so on. And they can conduct and supervise audits and investigations relating to the programs and operations of the establishments. And then there's some appointments. Is that the only officer? Only Inspector General? And then they have some duties and responsibilities. They recommend policies for and to conduct, supervise, and coordinate other activities. So let's look up Inspector General in general. Let's look it up on Google. Meet the Inspector General. So I think there is just one. Is it only Treasury? I'll say, what's up with the Inspector General? So in general, they're an investigative official in a civil or military organization. The plural of the term is inspectors general. So this is like the most kind of like detective things happen in the executive, I think. I don't know if there are, Congress has like the sergeant at arms, which is, I think, not investigative, is more like enforcing. And like, the FBI, I would assume, does most kind of investigative detective work internally in the US. The DOJ does whatever kind of like investigating is required for like prosecuting or defending cases. But it sounds like the Inspector General is maybe like an investigative entity for the Treasury. But we'll see. And Inspector General, it sounds like there are plural, leads an organization charged with examining the actions of a government agency. There are numerous offices of Inspector General at the federal, state, and local levels. And we see some stuff. Ronald Reagan terminated 16 Inspector Generals when he entered into office in 1981. His administration explained that Reagan intended to hire his own selections. So he rehired 5 of those who were terminated. Okay, we'll read about these folks, I guess. There's the 2020 dismissal of Inspectors General, Corruption Perceptions Index, Federal Law Enforcement in the United States. I guess I'll read all of these. What's the point of reading random laws if we don't, learn some stuff? Okay, we can meet the Inspector General. It's this dude, Michael Horowitz. And I'll read about him. I don't know anything about him. Okay, so that's some US codes. I was planning to also take a look at some regular software code, but I have an obligation that I have to get to, and the problems I was having with Ardor were ate up a bunch of the time I was trying to get to. So that's US codes. Maybe before I go, one more thing we could do that's more software oriented is we can take a look at the US statutes at large. So this is another way to look at the law. The US code is all kind of chopped up and organized thematically. And then the statutes at large are the publications of all of the statutes. And so we can go, for example, here, 1789 to 1791. And these, I assume, are photographic copies. No, I don't know how they make these. They look pretty close to scans, but the text looks a little bit too crisp. Well, maybe. But the hard part with this is kind of like an append-only log, if I understand. So in order to see what the actual law is, you need to not only like look at the appropriate like tax code, let's say from 1984 or whatever the first thing we saw was, but you need to look at all of the subsequent laws and make sure that they don't contravene or repeal the law you're looking at. But there is there's like a search thing, isn't there? Yeah, there's like an API somewhere. Developer Hub, API, bulk data repository. So these are all cool. Welcome to the GovInfo Developer Hub. As part of the GPO's continuing mission of America Informed, we are making it easier for developers and the public at large to access and work with the information available on GovInfo. So there's some stuff on GitHub. Here's the API. Here's the sample bill status. So I guess you can check in on a bill, maybe programmatically. Our API is intended to provide data users with a simple means of programmatically access GovInfo content and metadata, which is stored in self-describing packages. So they're using XML here and here. I think that there's a custom XML for US legal code, like a custom law thing. The schema is USLM 1.0. The United States Legislative Markup Language. And it has a GitHub repo. So this is just, this is like the intersection of the US democracy, government, and code. And I'm pretty sure that you can do a search. I don't know if you can do a search on their website. And I think that this is just regular text search. This is an index. This search box seems to do nothing because I'm too zoomed in. And let's try one more time. Search terms. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so there's some search thing you can do, like collection, statute, US code, this thing. And maybe we do plug it into this search thing if this worked, which it doesn't seem to. Is it not working because I am blocking ads? I doubt it. Oh, maybe it goes here. Yeah, okay. So we have some sort of search apparatus. It might be possible to use this and figure out what the whole API is to do interesting searches, but I don't know that yet. So I'll leave that at there. So that's the US legal code. At least a little bit of it. Thanks for watching.